Brad Williams, Excel Prime. This is a review. This is going to be very simple, straightforward. Some of this stuff you may have forgot or what have you. Sums. Just a bunch of sum functions that we're going to use, or you're going to use, or you may not use. Here, sum adds numbers together. Sum range, SUMIF, sums numbers that meet a criteria. Aggregate, define, perform calculations for a database or a list. IFERROR and the sum together. Here, you can use the aggregate function to ignore errors while summing a list of cells. Here's the formula. We're going to have an example over here on the left. I just want to go through and as a review, aggregate 6 cells. The aggregate, and I don't know if I have that broken down, but we'll just work through it. The aggregate, we have a function number, 1 to 19. Here are the 19 different functions within aggregate. So whatever we want to do, we can. We have aggregate 6. It's a sum. If we want min, max, what have you, we just change that number. We're going to have this name range, etc., etc. Talking points, calculations, sums. Cells equals 88. Right here, sums. And what happened? Calculations containing incorrect data is a common issue in Excel. For instance, the following worksheet formula returns NA due to NA errors in the name range cells D5 to D15. In the majority of cases, the errors can be fixed by inputting the missing data, at which point the sum function will resume operations. In fact, it's better when calculations produce errors, as it indicates that there are issues with the data that should be investigated. However, there are cases in which you need to ignore errors and total the available numbers. In this example, we consider 3 alternate formulas. The SUMIF, using the SUMIF function with the not equal operator is one possibility. SUMIF cells 88 don't equal, that's the less than, greater than, don't equal NA. This is fairly simple, and it operates correctly so long as the list contains only NA errors. SUMIF returns the sum of all values that are not NA. However, the SUMIF function will return an error if another type of error occurs. For example, a div error, and that's a dividing by 0 error. Aggregate. Okay, we're going to get into the aggregate, and notice that it worked right through the NA error. Use the aggregate function for a more robust alternative. By setting function number to 9, sum, and options to 6, the function aggregate in cell F7 is configured to sum and ignore errors. So here we have options and number 6. So look at a few others. We can use 0 to ignore nested subtotals and aggregate functions. 1, subtotal, ignore hidden rows, nested subtotal, and aggregate functions. 2, ignore error values, nested subtotal, and aggregate functions. 3, ignore hidden rows or error values, etc. Ignore nothing. Ignore hidden rows, ignore error values, ignore hidden rows. And you have a lot of options if you want to work with this aggregate. Think of it as an army Swiss knife. That's a lot of different variations. And well, again, you'll master this if you know you're going to be working with this aggregate function. The IFERROR. This is sort of a, well, it's my fallback. I use IFERROR all the time, probably more than I should. You can incorporate IFERROR, and it will sum this information if there is a, well, it's sort of a blunt force, and it will take care of almost all errors. IFERROR, using the sum function together with the IFERROR function, we can generate a more accurate formula for a list. Okay, IFERROR cells equals sum and ignore errors. This is a list formula that requires the use of Control-Shift-Enter in older versions of Excel, excluding Excel 365 and Excel 2021. This formula uses the IFERROR function to detect and convert errors to 0. The named range cells in this example contains 11 cells that can be displayed as a list. It's a very useful tool. We're going to sum cells B8. If we look at this, F9, we can see we have NA errors. Sum stops immediately. SUMIF, We can range F9. You see the NAs. It's just going to do its thing. We can do this, F9, and cancel. Not going to do what I want it to do. Let's hit SUMIF, F9, and it's not going to show us anything. It's just going to show 1817. We could go in here to NA and look at criteria, F9, and it probably is not going to do anything for us. They just take it for granted. It's going to do what it's going to do. Aggregate, we're going to have a 9-6 cells, and I doubt if we can get any output from here. See what happens here. See what happens. It doesn't do anything. Again, it's one of these situations where you take it for granted that this is correct. Sum if error, value, F9. Well, it's just going to show us this stuff. NA, going to add this stuff up. And sum is just going to say, sum, everything, that's not an error. We have an if error here because we put the if error, notice the difference? We put the if error in between here, and it's just showing error. You have to ask yourself, do you want to sum everything but errors? Or do you want if error to trigger an error? That's the difference. So this is just a matter of knowing the tools and knowing the functionality. The only way to get used to this is just incorporating it either in your work, in your learning, in your day-to-day operations, or just practice. And it's a challenge. Okay? When I'm sitting down, either recording or designing this stuff, or day-to-day, when I see something new, I have to go back. I have to go back and relearn it. There is no way I can remember all this stuff. It's just a lot of information. So don't put that much pressure on yourself. Okay? When you get tired, walk away. Walk away, either find something else to do for an hour or two, leave it and let it rest. Percolate. And the next day, you're going to go, all right, I see it now. That's why I threw this review in here. At the intermediate level, you just take things for granted. You're just going to use what you've been using forever because you're not digging in and finding other resources. I'm turning over rocks for you. You may see something new here going, okay, that might work, that might not, or I've used it, it doesn't apply to our application. But anyway, Brad Williams, XL Prime, thanks.